Friday's child. Bad luck is his brother. Friday's child.
Well, welcome to another podcast from the Fire Station Creative, and we are incredibly fortunate today to have one of Scotland's musical legends with us, Martin Metcalfe from Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie, and of course Isa and the Filthy Tongues, who became the Filthy Tongues, and many other things, and a co-writer with me in the first Comeback Skids album, and wrote some very fine songs on that album. So welcome, Mr. Metcalfe.
Happy to be here.
Well, great. I mean, I'll lay my colours on the table. I've always been a fan, and it's been a great privilege to work with you, and I've enjoyed it immensely. You are, a phenomenal songwriter, and I think probably have one of the underrated voices of any person that came out of the music industry in the UK, for sure.
I thought you were going to say came out of Bathgate. Well, there are a couple.
Is there anywhere else other than Bathgate? Well, let's talk about Bathgate. What was that like when you were the teenage Martin Metcalfe?
Being a teenager in Bathgate was... I think being a teenager anywhere is pretty hard. You know what I mean? It's pretty hormonally horrible because you've got lots of... everyone around you's hormonal. They're all basically high.
They're all wankers, basically.
And male hormones tend to be driven by sex and violence. So there wasn't so much sex in Bathgate for teenagers. So it was like all shifted onto the violence side of the spectrum. So it was a pretty violent sort of place. It's like the border. It's like Juarez between Texas and Mexico, or just over the border. We were the border between the east of Scotland, the fairly nice east of Scotland, unbigoted, and into the west where things get a bit...
So you're a portal, really, into insanity and bigotry, sectarianism, and kind of machismo.
Knife violence. There was a bit of knife violence in Bathgate, which you didn't get, further over,
So to be different in that environment is never easy.
It's dangerous.
It's very dangerous,
I didn't have, unlike some lucky people, I didn't have big brothers to take care of me. So I was on a knife edge a lot of the time with people because I did dress differently. I didn't have, to be fair, I just didn't have the guts to do the full punk thing at that point. It's a little bit like they say in Manchester, like Sean Ryder says, yeah, we did the punk thing like the Buzzcocks, it's like ties and shirts and all that. So, and I imagine Manchester was pretty, difficult to be different there as well.
I think you may be wrong in the sense that as a person who did go to Manchester during the punk period, right at the very beginning, we were there in 77. And actually, because it's a big city, and he stuck to the city itself, it was quite appreciative of that. The other scene, I think it's tougher to come from places like Bathgate, where it's a kind of male, macho, patriarchal world that you're coming from. And if you're in any way different from what's already been set, then you're breaking the mold, and people don't like that.
Yeah, you break the mold and they break your head for it. Yeah, so... I had a hard time because I was actually quite a weak kid because I had an illness in my childhood, so I was like behind sort of in physical development and all that. So it was and I also had a mouth on me as well. I had an opinion, which is another thing that pisses people off. So, and I was into this.
So you haven't evolved much, have you?
Well, and I was to me, as far as my circle went, and I was the first person that was into punk in Bathgate. Yeah. There probably were dotted around a few people that were listening to John Peel and got into it. But actually people rejected it quite heavily, thought it was, the young kids that were all like into their football and into their maybe Led Zeppelin or maybe into, whatever music, really were kind of repelled by punk. And that's my age group, I'm not even talking about parents here. So I was confused and
But were you a kind of Bowie, Roxy Music already?
Yeah.
So in many ways, if you're listening to Bowie, Roxy Music, Iggy Pop, Lou Reed, pre-punk,
I wasn't then, because I didn't, like you. Unlike you, I didn't have brothers who played these other strange. All I had was my mother playing the radio or some classical music now and again, which was a weird thing for Bathgate, and a weird thing for her really, because she was from a really low-level working-class family in Bonnyrigg in East Lothian. But so I was listening to Bowie. That primed me. I think Pin-Ups is a real primer for punk. I think Bowie primed the whole scene. And Pin-Ups was a cover version album, which was a surprise at that point. I don't think anyone had done that kind of major, I'm doing a cover version LP sort of thing. A lot of people followed. And
it was a homage to a certain type of music from the 60s.
Yeah, and it was British. So it was British sort of proto-punk, some of that, because he had the Kinks in there, and he had like the Yardbirds and all these British explosion bands, the British invasion bands. He was going to do, I found out recently, an American version of that. So all the stuff, which would have included the Velvet Underground, the Stooges, and various other more obscure bands, because all these pieces of music were unknown to me, on Pin-Ups. I'd never heard them on the radio. I don't think I was aware of the Kinks. I might have heard Lola in my childhood, but I don't really remember anything else.
But it kind of set the tone for what punk. So if you were into that when punk happened, it kind of made sense, didn't it? So what was the first record that you heard, even previous to punk, that really set the tingle factor in Martin Metcalfe's life, so you realised that music was going to be a big part of your life?
Well, okay, so I got into Bowie. And then somebody said, have you heard John I'm Only Dancing? Because it wasn't on an album. It hadn't been played on the radio because the BBC actually really disapproved of that song because of its gay implications. And that's why they didn't show that fantastic video that they made, or film that they made with Mick Rock directing. And so that was a kind of obscurity, that song, even though I think it had a high chart position. But John I'm Only Dancing, I was like, wow. Never heard the song.
Did you understand the ambiguity of it?
I kind of did, but it didn't really, it didn't faze me. I'm not gay, but I never had a big kind of... My mother was quite an open-minded person, and I think I had a lot... I didn't have racial, religious, or sexual prejudice, growing up. I didn't have a father who was going, that's... I had
quite a progressive environment.
Yeah.
In some ways, you probably didn't even realise it at the time. So you, as you say, were absolutely set for this thing that just exploded. Yeah. And when it exploded in front of you, did it just feel like, hallelujah, this is for me?
It was...
We're talking about punk rock, of course.
Yeah, punk rock. It was like I'd become born again in a religion or something. I was completely taken over by it emotionally. And nobody else knew what the hell it was. And I was, somebody had mentioned I was interested in punk rock to someone. He said, apparently there's a punk special on tonight. It was the John Peel punk special. And it was the first time I heard Anarchy in the UK. And that wiped the floor with every other record I'd ever heard. And it's actually better than any other Pistols record to me. It's different from every Pistols record. It's organised in a different way. It's got a harmony in it, which is obviously Glenn Matlock, So that piece of music still stands as kind of my core, if you like.
And the lyrics. The lyrics were just outstanding. I don't think they can be matched by any other band that came from that era. It was almost the first record was the best record, and we all kind of lived in its shadow ever since. Yeah. Not a bad shadow to live in, I might add. It was just so outstanding. So you were attached to this movement. Mm-hmm. So did you? Because you would have only seen the photographs of what was happening in London and maybe a little bit of Manchester at that time. Did you start to change the way the young Metcalfe looked at that point in time?
I don't know if I did. I don't know if I had the capacity in a town. I would have been one dot in a sea of normality, and it would have made me really, really vulnerable to attack, which I was anyway. And people might think that's, a kind of hyperbole or something. It's not. It was a dangerous sort of life to be part of. So I couldn't. And by the time that punk took on, you know, in the schemes around Bathgate or in Bathgate, I was thinking, but this isn't what it's meant to be. You're not meant to copy. The punk was not about copying. It was DIY. It's about recreation. It was almost like it was DIY glam in a way. A lot of it came from, you know, the Clockwork Orange look, and a lot of it came kind of from, you know, what's that? What's that movie, the Time Warp, that song's in? Let's Do the Time Warp again. The movie everyone went to and dressed up in. Anyway, that vampire type thing. So you had Dave Vanian, who was actually, you know, Dracula. That's how he was dressed. It wasn't...
But punk had many strands within it as a genre. You had the comic book fun, like the Damned were, and the Rosillos were a little bit, I mean, were they really punk? And then you had the more polemical punk bands like the Clash, and bands who actually felt they needed to use the platform to say something about the environment that we're part of. And there was like also bands that were purely nihilistic. I mean, the Pistols in many ways was just pure nihilism, you know, and the fact that they imploded made perfect sense, you know. So at this point in time, had you picked up a guitar at this point in time?
No. I was very lucky, I suppose, in that my mother and father were older when they had me.
They were older than you,
They were older than me, yeah. It's not, this isn't Broxburn we're talking about. And my dad had relented and allowed the family, me, my mother and father, to go on a holiday. Because this was just amazing, going to abroad. So we went to Mallorca one time, and my mother picked up a cheap Spanish guitar over there and brought it back. So... And I think they did that because my auntie went to Mallorca and they were just like keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. And so I never travelled again on a plane though until I got a record deal. So that's how weird that situation was. I never ever got abroad until 15, maybe even 17 years later. So anyway, so there's a wee Spanish guitar hanging around the house that nobody's playing. And I pick it up about Easter 1977. I got the Anarchy in UK record about November. I got it ordered into the local shop and whatever. And the reason I picked the guitar up was because I read a review of the Jam, and the reviewer said these are all easy songs, C, D, A, G, whatever. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So anyone can do it then, you know. And so I picked up the guitar, I got the chord book, and I learnt the basic chords, and I found I had an ear for music. And I wouldn't have known that because nobody told me I had any ability in music. At school, definitely not. I was more known for my painting or art. I was a better artist than I was, or they just had a terrible music department in my school, and they had no idea that I had an ability. So I found I had an ear for it, you know, and I worked out the chords, and worked out the chords are pretty vacant. Obviously, the Ramones are such an amazing way to learn. This is like, they're like your first lesson in music. You know, you go there and you can hear the chords easily. You can hear where the emphasis is. They hit the cymbal at the emphasis point. It's very, very simple music. And the chords...
every song's exactly the same, practically.
Yeah, so I learned Susie as a headbanger.
Nice.
And I learned their version of Let's Dance. And so I was like, all these three-chord songs, you know, it was back to rock and roll at the very beginning of rock and roll, you know, 1956 or so.
Yeah, exactly. So you started picking it up, you got a sense that you had a natural affinity with this instrument, and your schooling was based on kind of the simplicity of punk, and also the idea that anybody could start a band. So did that start to make sense to you, that maybe I could find some like-minded people, even in Bathgate and the kind of outlands of Bathgate?
Yeah, I had three pals, Chuck Parker, Jim Kelly, not Derek Kelly, and Peter Coulthard. two of the guys went to the Catholic school. Me and Chuck went to the Protestant school. So that wasn't in my mind, but, you know, it just showed you that Bathgate was a bit more of a melting pot than further west. So we were all hanging out and being pals. And so we said, like, anyone can do this. You be the drummer, you be the bass player, and Chuck, you be the roadie. And so Jim Kelly got a set of drumsticks and he started playing on a chair. It's very 1956, so he just started hitting. And the bass player had a job in the chicken factory, cutting in chicken necks.
He brought some chickens back for the
No. What I mean is he had enough money to buy a bass and a wee amp. So, bass player, acoustic guitar, you know, it's very skiffle. It's almost like the beginning of the Beatles. And Jim Kelly had a sense of rhythm. Peter wasn't, you know, a natural musician, let's say, but it turned out that Chuck Parker, the roadie, was a natural musician. Peter Coulthard played left-handed, and Chuck started playing around with his bass upside down, and he was making lots of good noises on it. You know what I mean? And he actually was a very, very good bass player. And so
what was this band called? Did you have a name?
In the beginning, I think we called ourselves something as punk as possible. It's a bit like the names you gave yourself in the Skids. So it's like that level. The Dormant Dum Dums was like
the Dormant Dum Dums. That's actually not bad. I quite like that. I think they need to re-emerge.
It's like Dum Dums who are ready to hit the world, you know, or ready to break out.
So I mean, you obviously had this amazing moment where you started a band called Goodbye, Mr. Mackenzie.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know it didn't happen immediately, but it felt like it happened immediately because that's the way the timeline works. People don't probably realise there's a lot of hard graft went into that, and for every up there was a down, etc. But it did seem to happen pretty quickly for the Mackenzies. Now, how did that come about? Where did you find these people? How did Shirley come into your life, for example?
Well, Shirley, I thought, what I'm going to do, like standing on stage, I hadn't discovered the magic of being, you know, having a drink before you go on stage. I had a kind of little bit of a Presbyterian attitude towards playing on stage, and I wouldn't let people drink in rehearsals and stuff. They bring cans of beer. I'm like, what are you fucking playing at? You know, this is serious. You know, you're 15 rehearsing in a church hall. Getting electrocuted and things like that by accident because it's so dodgy. And so where was I?
Shirley.
So Shirley. So okay, I wasn't. So I wasn't a natural front man. So I thought I've got to do something, you know, because having a hero like David Bowie, you see that he did so many things, and the mime part of it, you know, the mime that he learned to do, seemed to be really important in him having a presence on stage. I didn't really know what mime was or anything, but so what I thought was, what I'll do is I'll go, I know these, I wasn't very nice about them, the Edinburgh Youth Theatre, and they're all like, so I knew one of the guys that was in it. He was a really nice guy, really funny guy, into Joy Division, all this good stuff. So he said, Marty, why don't you, he had a funny accent, why don't you come along and do something in the youth theatre? And I'm like, give me a break. They all want to be the kids from Fame and all that. So I'm not doing that. He said, no, there's a good play coming up. And it was called the Mixter Maxter Factor. And it was written in Old Scots, and it was about the devil in a community. And I was like, all right, kind of having a goth bent at that point. I thought, well, all right, and then a bit of arrogance. I thought, I'll go for the lead part. Right, I'll go for the lead part and I'll do that, and that'll help me on stage, and it'll help me have command on stage. And so I go along and I audition for the part, and somebody else gets it, right? So I'm like, all right, stick your play up, you know. But then they come back to me and say, there's this weird part in the middle of the play where the guy who's like a snake oil salesman comes on and sells you like all these remedies for baldness, for tinnitus, all these things that you can't cure. Like, and he has a big spiel, and it's completely one person on stage. It's a break basically in the show. With
it's a monologue.
Yeah, so it was a monologue, and I thought, that'll scare the shit out of me. I'll really have to get this right, you know, and it'd be. So I went, all right, I'll do that. So I went to Edinburgh Youth Theatre, and I did it purely as an exercise to do something with my music, you know. And who was there but a 16-year-old Shirley Manson.
That's right. So that's how you met her.
Yeah,
And
she was over in the corner holding court. All these younger girls, or maybe they weren't younger, but they seemed it.
So she was already the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She attracted my attention. She got my attention, basically.
Well, I mean, of all the many front people I've met, she's a natural, right?
Yeah,
She just
yeah.
has that natural cockiness, and she adopted a kind of male persona into a deeply kind of female world, in a sense, you know. So she managed to combine the two so brilliantly. I've never really seen that done. Other than I shared the flat with Steve Severin from Susie and the Banshees, so I spent a lot of time in my life adoring Susie, although she ignored me, unfortunately. But it was a similar thing, you know. She could be with the boys, but she was a strong woman, really. That was at the heart of the whole thing. So you knew immediately she had to be in the band.
Well, I didn't actually. I knew immediately there was some. Well, I thought she has a presence and confidence. And I thought we had been. I'm sad to say this, but I don't know if you remember a song called "Sound of the Crowd" by the Human League. It was the first song from their commercial period, but actually, I still think it's a great song, and the way the female vocals worked and all that, and also the Talking Heads doing the live thing. They had female backing vocalists, so we got her in and someone else from youth theatre as a backing vocalist. So it wasn't like we were bringing in someone to take over. It was.
Or you were actually just getting her in because you fancied her.
Well, Shirley says that's the case. She says that's what that it was all about sex. In my point, but I really actually think it's the other way around. I don't know about. I'm not talking about sex really. I'm talking about the fact she wanted to do something with her life. So, and I'd noticed her.
So the Mackenzies are now fully formed, ready to go. You've got a great combination of you and Shirley up front, great band behind you, Big John, absolutely, Derek in the band. You're a super cool looking band. It's beginning to happen for you. When did you start to feel it's actually on the move now?
Really, when we got the record deal, you know, I mean, there were various points along the way. Like we got on the Tube in 1986, but we didn't get the record deal till '88, and we actually blew a record deal because we had so many A&R men up from London in one gig, and it was just a disaster. Our manager said, "It's Glasgow. The audience is going to be great. We've got this new venue called Fury Murray's. Going to put you in there, and we've got 56 A&R men flying up after we'd been on the Tube, and." There was no punters.
Yeah.
So it was empty. And all the A&R men were up at the bar, right up at the back of the hall. Yeah. Empty dance floor in front of us. So I suppose we could, you know, maybe we should have got a deal, but I think like the herd instinct over there was like, nah, this band's not gonna do it. And then the following night, it was just like explosive in Edinburgh, full of people. So it was the opposite from what Elliot said. The Edinburgh gig was amazing. The Glasgow gig was a total washout. So, but the Tube, that was a great moment, you know, because the Tube was so important at that point.
And you were very good on it.
Yeah,
I mean, you looked good and it sounded good. It was, I mean, it was felt like it's alchemical sometimes, isn't it, or is it luck that you do the right thing at the right time and everything seems to be aligned. I mean, I presume it is kind of luck in many ways because if that hadn't happened, maybe many other things would have happened. But that was the moment where it kind of exploded.
I suppose what happened was our management, who were good in lots of ways. I mean, I'm not trying to slag them off. That was an unfortunate situation with Fury Murray's. But the manager and his partner worked like dogs on this release of The Rattler. The manager also said, that's a great song, because we didn't really hear it. We thought it was just a bit of fun or whatever. And so she went round all the radio stations physically and took the record into radio stations, and we got played all over the country and definitely all over Scotland. We got Radio 1 play on an indie record, and it was pure hard work actually on their point, and also it was a good record. So that's when things started to lift a bit, and people started to expect a bit from us. And then I've got to say, we'd kind of, on a way, though things had been such a rocky ride to the record deal, Shirley and I got hammered drunk one night in London before playing Dingwalls. And we went to Dingwalls and we were like, we got a lock-in. I'd never heard of this thing called a lock-in in London where you can stay till 1 or 2 in the morning or whatever, if the owner allows you. And so we got up the next day after sleeping on the floor or something and went to Dingwalls, and we were like really screwed up with, you know, with alcohol and the bad sort of bed situation. And we got drunk and we just kind of had a bit of a mad night. And it turned out there was an A&R man there. So that is pure luck, because that's the sort of situation where you think, well, that's a failure. The singers are drunk, you know what I mean? And they're just you know, messing around. But he thought we had a chemistry. And there were chemicals in us. It was ethyl alcohol.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, the deal. Rattler is now an iconic song. You're on the march. Your album's a success. Did your lifestyle change at that time? Did things change from? Because often people think in rock and roll bands that suddenly you have a hit and the world changes overnight. It doesn't, does it? It's all a bit slow. But at what point in time did you feel things were changing in your life? You know, that it was going in a direction that you always kind of hoped or dreamed that it might?
Well, at that point, I mean, we had people coming to our gigs, like Richard Jobson came to a gig in the Mayfair in Glasgow. And
that's because I fancied you, not Shirley.
Well, I actually thought it was Finn's sisters. You were saying, who are the Germanic girls over there? Because Finn's sisters were very attractive, a bit like himself, you know. So we, like, because we'd loved the Skids, and like, Richard's coming to the gig, and you know, and you were in the same label as us, and it was all like, oh, we're part, you know, we're part of something. We didn't know what it was, I suppose, and so we played the Mayfair. We'd, you know, done small gig before that, Mayfair, and then the next one was the Pavilion in Glasgow. So you're going like up. Then the next one was the Barlands. So at that point, you feel like you're off and running, you know.
And because often when that happens, the chemistry in the band, there's changes because success brings it with it a lot of baggage, and people change. Did you start to see kind of a fragmentation within people when that success was kind of coming at you fast and furiously?
I don't feel any fragmentation apart from
in your own brain.
Yeah. No, we were tight. We were tight as a group. Even though John joined late to the party, you know, he joined after we signed the deal. His band had broken up, and he was a very odd addition to the band, but it really kind of made us, because apart from the fact he's just an amazing person, you know, to be around, he has his ups and downs, you know, he definitely did in those days. John was quite volatile, but he was also hysterically funny and just absolute the salt of the earth, you know, from the west of Scotland.
I remember having you on a ridiculous TV program called the Garden Party. I think I was fired one day from introducing it as the Garbage Party. But you were, I had you on as my guest because I was allowed to choose my own guest, and I had kind of a lot of obscure bands on, and it was really, and then I had you, and all I remember about the Mackenzies, because I was hanging out with you for quite a while that day, was laughter. A lot of laughter. I mean, you know, it was a band that really liked each other.
We got on, and you know, John, like if everyone's leaving the room, you know, go doing something, you know, whatever, end of rehearsal, John would always say, "Watch yourself going down that road," you know, and it's just such a bizarre actual sentence. You know, how can you watch yourself? You know, it's like an out of body experience, or I don't know, but it's the thing that your granny would say to you. Indeed. You know.
So let's move on to working with Talking Heads, or members of Talking Heads, to produce your album. How did that come about, and what was that experience like?
Well, we had a lot of rocky moments with record labels. We actually went through 3 record labels. We got a record deal, changed record label, to another major record deal. Then again, we got involved with Debbie Harry's manager and Talking Heads manager and Ramones manager, a guy called Gary Kurfirst. And we supported Debbie Harry, and he saw us and thought the band's got something. I'm starting a record label. So he started his own Radioactive Records, which went through MCA in Britain and another major in America. But so when the Mackenzies fractured, we had this kind of extra project we were trying to do. We wanted our next album to have a few songs sung by Shirley. We wanted it to be a bit like a Velvet Underground and Nico sort of album, with maybe she sang 4 or 5 of the songs out of the next album. And it turned out, so we went back to Gary Kurfirst, who'd got rid of us because of our management. I said, look, we've got rid of our management. Will you take the Mackenzies back? He said, I can't do that. You know, I wouldn't get any respect from the label. But I will sign, if Shirley's got anything going on, which she did, I'll sign her. And so, or us with her. So we started this thing called Angelfish, which was the final stepping stone for Shirley's, you know, world domination. And so we couldn't believe our luck, really, that we'd got, you know, we'd moved sideways a lot in major record labels. And now we were with the manager of all these 1976, 77 punk bands that we loved. And we're like, wow. And then he said, I'm going to get Chris and Tina to produce your album. And we're like, really? So there we were in Connecticut at their house, you know, recording in their living room. It was just amazing, you know. And they were great people. They were really interesting, very intelligent, very knowledgeable, very funny people. And they had a lot going on, though, and I'm not sure if they knew how to deal with our goth punk sort of thing. But Tina definitely did. Chris likes a little bit more jolly sort of music. He likes things to be more up, whereas Tina had to stop her car because she heard that Cream song, "The Sunshine of Your Love," and the darkness of it, she loved. You know, this is when she's a teenager. So she got us in that kind of late 60s, you know, goth punk sort of way. And but they were both amazing people. And Shirley was very, very nervous, and she was stuck up in one of the bedrooms they called the Prince Room because it was painted purple. And she was singing away from the band. She couldn't see us, and we were recording down in the living room. And so she had a bit of sort of a traumatic entrance into being a front person, and she never pushed it. You know, she may have been a natural front person, but she never said, I deserve this, I want it. That was not the way she was. So that's where that went, and that was a great experience. Yeah.
And on the Shirley front, what was the moment where that ended with? I don't mean your relationship between you two. I mean with the band, and she went off to Garbage.
To Garbage. What happened was we toured in America for Angelfish. I'm afraid to say my drinking and drugging had really, it was wiping the floor with me by that point. We'd fallen out about money quite a lot. There were lots of little situations. The band, the Mackenzie, had been left with a big bill, in our eyes, which was an estimated £84,000 VAT tax bill, and you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent with VAT. So we had a very hard time, and everything had fallen apart. So we had no way of raising that money. So myself and Derek Kelly had to work out how to get rid of this bill. And we got it down and down and down. Shirley ended up paying the final part of it, and that kind of blew it friendship-wise, I think, for us, because she felt...
And just winding back a little bit, I mean, how did you suddenly find yourself from being this kind of Presbyterian overlord in the beginning to being somebody who was become quite nihilistic and really indulging himself in alcohol and in drugs?
Yeah, I would put that down to something similar to Keith Richards, I think. If you watch those documentaries, the 4 of them on the BBC, Mick Jagger says, Keith's actually a very shy, introverted guy. You can see it in interviews. And he also says, if you're that sort of person and you're getting a lot of attention, then you'll find it quite disturbing and hard to deal with. And I think that was fundamentally my persona, my personality, you know, and being in the business, I felt I had to be, you know, there was a lot of attention on me, and there was a lot of, Martin's the singer, he has to go to all these events and be, you know, part of the promotional side of it, and meeting and greeting and all that sort of stuff. It was the singer that had to do that. So if you're not a natural in that area, you might depend on chemical enhancement, you know, and then you might think, oh, I feel fine now, you know, I'm tanked up enough. And then sometimes enough's never enough, you know, and it just takes you over. So
I mean, I've seen that with Stuart Adamson, obviously, and not a natural front man, and actually Stuart was a very shy guy, and so he ended up hiding behind that veil in the same way. And of course, John McGeoch was exactly the same thing, you know, like a very shy, incredibly smart, nice man, but had to bolster himself with a bit of help. And if you're not like that, you're always like, why do you need that? Like, it's because you don't understand what people are going through. Because, you know, I don't think people think it's a great joy to go out into a stage in front of, say, the Barrowlands, in front of 5,000 people or whatever. But actually, it takes a lot to drag yourself on there. For some people, me, I can't wait, because I find it very natural and easy. I don't mean that arrogantly. It's just a very easy thing for me. But I do understand. I didn't understand for years that some people, it's not easy and it's not natural, and it's actually, they're quite reluctant to be in that spotlight.
So another one was Kurt Cobain. Obviously, you know, he said to Courtney Love, "I wish I could be like Freddie Mercury." I mean, I don't wish I could be like Freddie. I know what he means, though. It's like someone who is born to be there, you know, in that position and feels good about it, you know. But even he did a power of drugs as well. So there are very few people that actually are meant to be there. That's why you're one in a million, you know. And David Bowie didn't want to be there. Yeah.
So you kind of were really in a bit of a mess then at that point in time. So and did you see the imminent collapse of the project?
I think I had that. Steve Strange said something that really resonated with me. He said, you make it big, although we hadn't made it big, like Steve Strange made it huge, you know, overnight in multiple countries around the world. And he said, you think it's going to last forever. So there's this kind of denial about things staying together, whatever will happen, because they have so far. And Shirley told me that, you know, later on, she said, I wasn't up for another round of Mackenzie's. I was at the end, really. And I actually couldn't conceive of that. I thought people would just, like I do, keep going with what you're doing. So I didn't see the end. But the end got a hold of me, you know. I stopped functioning. So I did have to face up to that eventually.
How long did that take for you to actually reconcile yourself to, you know, that thing that happens when it's no longer there suddenly, and it's very quick, isn't it? That suddenly people don't understand that. It happened to me when I was 21. You know, I had
really hard,
like so many hits, and for me was a singer with the Skids. My teenage years were all taken away from me because I was in a band that toured 300 days a year. So that was my life, and I thought the same thing. This will never end because I'm so young. And then at 21, it was gone, and nobody cared anymore. Nobody. I don't want to get the violins out here, but nobody cares. You were in that. But you were also a bit of a mess. How did you pull yourself out of that quagmire?
Well, I went into... Shirley was part of that. She kept saying, you're an alcoholic. Nobody else was saying that to me. And I was allowed to be drunk a lot. And, you know, on the job, it's one of the few jobs you can have where people go, this is the way it is. You know, everyone's off their face. You know, the Happy Mondays are on 5 different chemicals each, you know, and you know, management support that sort of thing as well. My manager had no issue with alcohol. He didn't like drugs, but he was like, let's drinking, that's fine. And I did a lot of drugs too, but the main thing that took me to the floor was alcohol. So I read an interview with Anthony Hopkins, and he said, now I'm going to blow my anonymity, which you're not meant to do, but he said AA is brilliant. They are brilliant, they are. And so and now somebody blew his anonymity, so you're supposed to keep it to yourself, really. Not really because it's like the Masons or something like that, just because it's not a secret society and so as such, but it's for reasons that are revealed later. It's better. The fewer people know what you're doing, the better. So I went to that organisation and didn't get sober straight away. It took me about a year and a half to go in, come out, go in, come out, and become suicidal eventually, because I had feet in both camps. And eventually I managed to put it down, you know, and stay stopped. That's the hard part. People say, you know, like Liam Gallagher, I quit last week. It's easy. Yeah, staying stop's the problem. It's not stopping that's the problem. So, or the difficult part. So that's how I cleaned up. And, you know, I like to help people that have got difficulties with addiction, purely because it helps me, really. I'm a selfish kind of guy. So my generosity is really, you know, it works both ways if I'm helpful to other people in that way.
So you found yourself again, and you find a new way of working with. You've got a new partner in your life. You start a band called the Filthy Tongues, originally called Isa and the Filthy Tongues.
Yeah.
I remember hearing, because my mother was called Isa, and my daughter's got her middle name Isabel. So I remember seeing the title before I knew it was your band, and I went, I've got to check them out. And I loved it immediately, because it was a kind of updated version of a kind of goth, cinematic David Lynchian world that you were, if that's correct.
That's right,
yeah. So that was the world that I was entering when I heard that music, and I saw it was you, and I just loved it immediately. You know, it was like my new favourite band. So I remember getting in touch with you. I saw a couple of gigs. I didn't tell you I was at the gigs, but I saw a couple of gigs, and I really loved the band. And I asked you if you would do the soundtrack to one of my movies called Newtown Killers, which you did an amazing job with. And I think that's when we started to connect around that time.
So, that's, you know, a few years ago now. But it's been very fruitful, I have to say.
No, and it's not just that. It was like you were absolutely on a roll then. You were making fabulous music and doing soundtracks to cinema, and you were out again. You were out there playing again. You weren't playing with the Filthy Tongues. You weren't playing the Barrowlands, but you were playing gigs again, and you were out there. And I mean, did you feel like? I mean, obviously you had ambitions for that band, but were they realistic this time?
Well, they were. It appears that to everyone else they weren't realistic, because we thought it was great, you know, and that it should have done a lot. You know, more should have came of that. Band. We thought Stacey was a really good front person. She looked good, a good voice. You know, she was my girlfriend before I discovered she had a voice, and then she sang, and I was like, that's that kind of deadpan, Kim Deal sort of voice that I love, and she just did a great job of that kind of understated vocal. Not somebody that had to go, you know, give it big rock and all of that sort of thing.
And she had a natural American twang. She's American, so she's from the South, Texan. So it's got a kind of drawl that really gives it a sexiness as well, which you could never give it. So that... Stacey's gone on to do her own thing with her own life, and you've still got the Filthy Tongues going, which is great, because they're a fabulous band. But then something must have given you the impulse to get the Mackenzies back together. Mine is Shirley, of course. And then, lo and behold, there you are selling out the Barrowlands on your first venture. That's quite something.
That was a beyond shocking. You know, it was actually a little bit of a shock to the system. It was a wee bit frightening, because it was a little bit. It brought back. It had recall of going up the hill again with Goodbye Miss Mackenzie, and you know what happened when you. When I went up the hill, I came down the other end.
Of course,
So I was like, wow. We just thought, well, this could be it. We might as well make the most of this. We put tickets on sale and they went bang. Not for the Barrowlands, for Liquid Rooms in the Garage in Glasgow. They just went bang. I got a phone call from Mark Mackey, the promoter, and it's like, you've nearly sold out today. And the Garage, like, really? That's unbelievable. We didn't have a level of arrogance about it at all. We were just like, we're just doing this. We'll do a few celebratory sort of gigs, and that'll be it. And then it was just like, do another night at Liquid Rooms. All these other little gigs were selling out. And Mark said, let's try the Barrowland. Let's give it a go. And we sold it out that year. So an amazing
It was
return.
amazing achievement. I didn't get to see you because obviously I'm a Mackenzie's fan, a bit of a groupie. But because we were playing in Glasgow the same night, and it was a bit of a downer for me because we were playing in it was a smaller place, but that's not the point. It was like, I actually didn't want to be with my own band that night. I wanted to be up the road watching the Mackenzies, which shows you, people have a deep affection for the band.
And one of my most powerful memories from that gig is what John had taken to doing before he went on stage, because John's got MS, so he's got crutches. He struggles to walk. So he walked up to the front of the stage with his crutches and raised them up into the sky like that, and the crowd went mad, and it was just such a beautiful visual image, John's back,
Yeah,
just
that's great.
great.
That was great, absolutely wonderful. So the Mackenzie still exists, the Filthy Tongue still exists. Yeah, you've had a fruitful period writing on the Skids comeback album, Burning Cities. The title was from one of your songs. You wrote a song with me called Kings of the New World Order, which has become a firm favourite live, and people. And now you're busy working on the next Skids album with me at the moment. So you seem to be in a very, very good place at the moment.
And I've got to remind myself, because sometimes when there's so many things to do in the day and you've got people phoning you up and I've got rehearsal today, I've come up to Dunfermline to do this today, I've got to watch the moaning voice in my head, It's like, get a grip here, this is good, this is a good day, another good day,
Exactly. And
yesterday was a great day.
And as we face nuclear annihilation, isn't it our duty to squeeze the juice out of each day? I think I've been very lucky that I've never suffered from depression or been an addict of any kind. But I've been around it all my life, and it's just great to see that you survived it, and you've got this energy again, which is because you are a brilliant talent, that, don't you? You're an amazing talent. You've got an amazing songwriting. But I was talking to Shirley, because I was going to put Shirley in one of my movies, and I still want to, because I think she's got that natural thing. If you find the right role for her. And she said, have you been working with Martin? I said, I have. I said, he's an amazing songwriter. I said, he's one of the greatest songwriters that ever came out of Scotland. So there you go. It's not a bad accolade.
Well, I can take some compliments about songwriting. I can take a few of them, because I think I do try very hard to. We've got a really sort of standards-wise. I try to keep. I want to create great records. Really, I'm still a bit old-fashioned. I want to create great recordings. That's my main thing. So I do put a lot of my juice into that side.
Well,
of
you're
it.
lucky also that your voice, which is outstanding, has got actually better as you've got older. It might not have the power of youth, but it's got the lilt that I think your songs need, that kind of melancholy twang that's in all of your songs, because they might have uplifting choruses, but if you were to analyse Martin Metcalfe lyric, there's a bit of kind of sadness in a lot of it, and a bit of melancholy at the heart of it.
Yeah, I suppose maybe I should have been Irish. You know what I mean? I've got that kind of misty-eyed, heartbroken stuff going on. But that's the stuff I like. I love Joy Division. And there are
and
other...
the Bunnymen. The Bunnymen,
yeah. They're... The pain is something that's essential in music, I think.
Of course.
And it's mixed with joy. There's got to be yin and yang, joy and pain all at once. That's where the heart and soul of music come from. It's something that you guys have got, and that you in particular have got. is that there's got to be a level of pain. Reading Steve Jones' autobiography, he said they recognised the pain in each other. You know, Johnny Rotten having that meningitis attack which destroyed his body and brain as a child, and Steve Jones with the abuse he suffered and the dyslexia and all the other struggles that are internal. I think these things are important to good artists. That you have to have scars of some kind.
Well, you put yours to good use, so it's been a great pleasure talking to you today, Mr. Metcalfe.
Thank you, Richard.
Soon to be, I would imagine, Sir Martin Metcalfe.
Never.
But well, let's not get into politics today. But anyway, it's a joy to have you, and you're a marvel, and long may it continue. Thank you very much. So, Martin Metcalfe, you're going to play a song for us here at the Fire Station Creative Podcast today. What will it be?
It will be Friday's Child, written by Lee Hazelwood for Nancy Sinatra, and she murdered it. So I'm gonna be kind to this song, hopefully. Friday's Child, bad luck is his brother. Friday's Child, sister's misery. Friday's Child, his daddy they called hard times. Friday's Child, that's me. Friday's Child never climbed the mountain. Friday's Child didn't even wanna try. Friday's Child makes something look like nothing. Friday's Child am I. Friday's Child, born a little ugly. Friday's Child, good looks passed him by. Friday's Child, who they'll forget to bury. Friday's Child, damn I. Friday's Child, damn I. Friday's Child,